Hi, this is Joel Locust for aetutesplus.com, and today I will be showing each and every one of you how to accomplish a set extension. Take a look at the shot real quick. We've got a couple of things going on here. We've got a physical location where we shot the actor at, which includes the building and the actor. We've got a 3D building over here and a little 3D fence, some lights, and some additional photographic elements. Now, the way that you would achieve this normally would be to build a giant cyclorama stage, a green screen, around the building. And some very major productions have the resources to do that, and this shot would be pretty simple at that point. You just key the entire building with the actor and put your background back there. But since we're not all accustomed to having expansive budgets, we'll be looking at a way to do this on shoestring. So let's get started. Okay, so we got a new project. We're going to double click in the project window to open up our import file dialog, and we're going to go to the folder where I've got the assets, set extension. And if you're not familiar with this file structure, these contents folders, these are actually from a Panasonic P2 rig. The footage was shot with a HVX 200, and this is kind of how they store their data on their little removable cards. So After Effects and Premiere support working natively with these files, which is how I like to do it. So we'll import some of our video files here. We'll just open them up, and you see it opens up just like a QuickTime. And we're just going to drag it down onto the composition box here, and that'll create a new composition with all the same settings as the source footage. So here's where we're going to start. We've got a shot of our actor at our location with a green screen setup. Now, when you're doing this shot on your own, you don't have to use this size green screen. You could use a smaller one, but the smaller the screen that you have, the more limited you're going to be in what your actor can actually do. We even ran into some problems with this on ours when he walks out and he kind of gets a little bit off the screen there. We deemed that this was an acceptable risk on set because it's a non-organic, it's a solid shape. So if we wanted to use this shot, we could just rotoscope this out. But really, the largest thing is going to be the hair and any kind of motion blur elements like you see right here. This is what you got to watch out for. This stuff needs to be front and center on the green screen, otherwise you're not going to have a happy time in post. So this is one plate, and we're going to start first by bringing in our second plate. We're going to navigate back to our contents, and we'll import our clean plate. You can see after we shot the take, we locked the camera down, and then we just moved the green screen and got everybody out of the shot and took a clean plate of the location that we were at. And this is not such a bad background, but it really doesn't suit the fantasy project that we were working on. So what we're going to do is make a cleaner plate of the roof without all of the junk from Baltimore in the back. So to do that, we're going to zoom in and hit G for the pen tool. And you start drawing around the rooftop. Got a little chair that we forgot to take care of in the back here, but we'll just put it all the way across like this. If anybody asks, they're sticks sticking up out. And we'll do the same for here because we we want a flat rooftop just for the sake of our environment, our CG environment that was modeled to be very similar to this. So now we've got a clean plate of the background that we want to keep. It's too short, so what we're going to do is right click on it and go to time, freeze frame, and we can just extend it out to the full shot. And this is actually a long take. You can see there's a lot of stuff going on here. So we're going to isolate the area that we want to work with, which is going to be when he's walking up. Before he starts dodging around. You just hit B and N to set your in and out points on the on your work area bar. And we'll just right click on that and hit trim comp to work area. And now we've got nice in and out points of just what we want. Okay, so we've cut out our rooftop and we have our footage selected for our take. So we'll just start by putting a key light on our footage. We'll just sample spot. You can see that we're already starting to see that our background plate is showing through our key. And this is essentially the core of the technique. You can apply this concept in a variety of locations in the exact same manner, as long as your action is limited to the scope of your green screen. So we'll just tighten up the key here. Set it to hard color. Soft color always looks terrible. You always want to set that to hard color, except in very specific situations. You can see we're also running into some shadows here. If you're using a green screen that's soft like this and it's windy, and you gotta watch out for this. On this particular shot, we were shooting day for night, so we're planning on putting a pretty thick black vignette around the edges, so this is also deemed an acceptable risk for the shot. But if you're trying to pull off the shot as a perfect shot, during the daytime when all this stuff would be very clearly visible, you need to watch out for that. And you can also get green screens that like prop up, that have a frame, and just like put like green tape along the edges so that you don't have that black frame, because you wouldn't be able to get rid of that. And those are not going to wrinkle as bad. They're not going to blow around in the wind. They're also smaller, so you have to look at your location and figure out what exactly you need to accomplish the shot that you're trying to achieve. So we'll continue with our key. What we need to do is we need to mask out our production assistants here on the sides. And we'll do that by just getting our rectangle tool and make sure that you have the layer selected. And we're just going to draw a rectangle here, rectangular mask. And we're going to set the mask mode here to subtract. Okay, now for the other side, what we're going to do, the plan for this shot is for it to be at a Dutch angle, plus we're going to have that vignetting. So I'm not too concerned about, for this shot, this stuff down here. But we do want to make sure that we mask out above it where it's going to be more visible. So I'm going to find the spot where he's completely over. And this is where I'm going to put my mask. So I've got my pen tool, and that's pretty common. You want to make sure you have your layer highlighted. Anytime you start drawing around with the pen tool and it creates a shape layer, it's because you didn't have your layer selected. And then we're also going to make that a subtract. Now we're going to feather these On this one, I just want to feather it on one axis because all of the information that we need to feather is horizontal. I just want to make sure that we feather just that one and make sure that we're not catching any of our production assistant. So now you can see that the shadows that were around this are nice and soft now, and they're blending pretty well. So now we need to feather the other mask, and we're going to do this on both axes. Now we're not going to crank this up too high, we're just going to give it a little bit of a feather, a little bit more than that, about 35, and the idea here is that we're going to be framing a lot of this out, so I'm not going to do anything more with this until I know later on in the shot exactly what needs to be covered and what doesn't, so we can limit the amount of rotoscoping that we need to do, if we need to do any. So the next step is going to be to bring in our background elements. We're going to bring those in. Just navigate to our asset folder. Got a tree line and a sky here. We'll bring those in. It's a good start. This is a image that was taken at the location. There's some scenes in this piece that we made that are filmed in the field surrounding the this little installation. So we actually took plates while we were there. So if you're going to be doing a lot of these kind of virtual sets in a larger piece, you want to make sure that you gather the right assets for your post work. So we actually have a tree line that we can stick back there from the other scenes. And we'll scale those down to about where they need to be to fill the frame nicely. You can see the horizon line is a little bit off, so let's hit W. W is for rotation, and we can just kind of adjust it just a little bit. Okay, and the sky is kind of bland here, so we've got a nicer sky that we can put in. There's all kinds of texture sites, free texture sites that are online. You look around for skies, you can find something that you like. And we're going to put that behind those trees. So we'll just get our layers lined up here. And we'll start, just do a really simple sky replace on the still in the background here. We'll start with a Luma key. We want to key out the brighter. And we'll just turn our threshold. I'm going to scale this up and just get a little more detail in our clouds back there. Yeah. We've got all these like harsh, jaggedy edges. So I like to blend a second plate without the Luma key so that the edge is going to be cleaner. Just put the mask on there. If we hit F, it'll bring up the mask feathering. And we'll just feather that out and invert it so that the edge of our tree plate kind of blending with the real sky into the replaced sky. And it kind of has this nice gradient that you see in real skies anyhow. So that is looking pretty good. The last element that we're going to be putting in to the background environment is going to be the building and the fence. Now I've got a render here, a little RPF I can bring in, and you can see this is just a little 3D model. We've got this curved fence, and we've got a corridor here, and some really basic textures. Really, this is nothing complicated. There are a million free textures that you can find out for like stone patterns like this, or for tiles. They're all over the place. So I don't really want to give you a modeling tutorial because this is highly contextual. It's unlikely that whatever films you're creating are gonna require a structure that looks like this. But let me just show you kind of how this was made, the principles involved in the modeling. I can't say, I mean, like a lot of After Effects people, I don't really care for modeling too much. But, you got your ground plane, and making really simple buildings like this is a piece of cake, really. You just kind of scale it to how we want it. This is kind of how we made that corridor, and we can duplicate this cube. Just Control C, Control V to paste a copy of it, and we'll make this one shorter like this. And we'll push it down. Basically, everything in this model was created using the Boolean subtraction in Cinema 4D. As you can see, we just plop those right in there, and the order that you have these in makes a lot of difference. So you gotta make sure that you have it right. Otherwise, the model is totally different. Once you have that in there, like a really important thing is to have soft shadows. So when you are adding a light, you want to make sure that you turn on soft shadows. I can just render the scene here real quick. You can see you kind of get a little bit separated from our ground plane there. Make sure you have the bool selected when you're moving that stuff. But really, like, having these soft shadow maps, and there's some tools out there that you can get that make it easier for you to do that. That's really how you're going to make it look realistic and not like a CG model. You get your texture on there, and then you're going to add, your soft shadows. And like I said, I'm not really much of a modeler. This is a very primitive model, but if you're just creating things for the background, this is a good way to do it. And there's other tools out there where you can get pre-made buildings, and if you're just looking to pursue compositing, as your skill set, which is essentially what I like to do. I like to not get bogged down in how to handle this, and I think this is a good way to kind of expand your team. When you get people that you're working with, what you individually study. It's a good idea to specialize. And this is not my specialty. So we'll go back to After Effects, where it's much nicer. And we have our plate already rendered. You want to make sure that your modeler gives you a plate with alpha. You can see we've got like nice transparency all around. And we kind of want this corridor to connect with the building, because that's the concept for the layout of this place. Yeah, that's kind of like matching up pretty nicely there. And when you're working with still frames like this, where the camera's locked down, there's a lot of freedom. Like, you don't have to go back to the modeler and be like, hey, render out another frame for me. Because we're creative compositors, and we don't need modelers all the time. We can just duplicate this layer, and we'll just mask the fence off. And we'll just extend it. We'll just move it right over and extend it ourselves. We don't need no stinking modelers. Yeah. So it's looking pretty good. I think our rotation, our horizon line might be off a little bit. So what we'll actually do is we'll parent one of these to the other and hit W for rotation. Make sure we have the right one selected, and just play around a little bit, see if we need to fix it. Okay. A little bit different than I had it before, but that looks nice. I like it. It's got a little bit more depth. Now we're going to look real close at our seam here. We're going to highlight and make sure that it's lined up perfect. Just like move the cursors around after you select it, just to get it right. And we're also going to feather the mask a little, so we don't risk any harsh edges. Alright, spectacular. It's always a good idea to scrub through your image, periodically, to make sure that there's no issues arising. If there's a problem with your key, you want to find that out earlier rather than later. Well, now that we've got all of our background elements in there, we can actually, see about how we're going to frame this thing. We're going to connect everything to our actor plate. So let's just highlight everything and just parent it right to there. So now we can just move this around and get it where we want it. I like Dutch angles. Dutch just means that you've got it kind of askew. Like there's things that are wrong in the world, and there's always things that are wrong in the world of film. That's why there's films about them. It's because there's a epic struggle against the wrongness. So Dutch angles make a lot of sense to me. You can see most of the issue that we were having with the gun over here is just kind of going away. It's not really that big of a problem. And I'm going to move these in here a little bit because this is pretty close to the corner. And when we put our black vignette, because it's going to be a very, very dark scene around the edges here, this gun is going to just blend in with that background anyhow. We might not need to do any rotoscoping. And no rotoscoping is good rotoscoping in my book. Okay, so now it's time for some color work. First thing we're going to do is pre-compose all of our elements. This will be the rooftop pre-comp. And we'll start adding some adjustment layers. Alright, create a first adjustment layer. And we'll add a curves to start. And we're going to do something really drastic. We'll just drop it like that. This is what we're going to use to create our first vignette element. And just select the ellipse tool over here. Just double click on it. And we'll invert it. And we'll feather it about 650 pixels. And we'll create a new adjustment layer. And we'll put another curves on that. And that's just going to be our S curve, just to add a little contrast to our shot. I just want to do that in general. And also, we're going to add a tint. So we're not vignetting this one. We'll add a tint at about 45%, just because at night, your colors aren't going to be as vibrant. And we'll create another adjustment layer. And this is going to be our little blur vignette. We're going to add a little bit of an optical look to it. And we'll just put a blur on here at about 12 pixels. And you want to repeat the edge pixels. And same thing, select your layer, double click up here, and invert it. And we'll feather it like really high number, like 700. Just kind of give it that filmed with a filmic camera look. So we're going to new adjustment layer. Now this one we're going to like kind of center our vignette around the light a little bit. We're going to bias it a little bit just so it looks like the light's kind of affecting the environment. That's going to be inverted a bunch too. And it's going to be a ramp. And we're going to give it like a really neat color, like a kind of a deep blue. Something like there's a lot of blue in it. Yeah. Something like that. And we'll put a CC composite on here. It just composites everything before it on top of it. We're going to set the mode to multiply. We'll add a little bit more tint, because we're getting too much color, really. We really need to darken this image up a bit. We're going to add the levels up here. Kind of push our midtones down. And I can get rid of some of our highlights. I'm really not seeing enough of this, so I'm going to start pulling the mask in. Just so that this stuff's going to be more visible. I kind of like having these like unusual shaped adjustment layers like this, because it makes it seem a little less computerized. You know, if you don't always have perfect circles creating your vignettes, sometimes if you have these odd shapes, it creates a nice look. We definitely want to keep a certain level of brightness on the subject's face. And again, bias it a little bit towards the light. Kind of dusky. And then just our curves, we'll just pull everything down, create a lot of contrast like this. Now you can see, now we're getting a little bit more extreme, so we can pull it out. You can see we got a nice and dark corner here, kind of like we were going for, to cover up some of that issue that was down there. It's a little extreme. We'll pull down the opacity a bit. Last thing that we're going to do, a little bit of icing. We'll add a lens flare. You want to actually make sure that you've got a black. So we'll just put a lens flare on there. If you've got no light factory, or a similar tool like that, that's really good for this kind of work. And I would recommend using that. But you can do some interesting stuff with the stock lens flare, as long as you don't put it on there just like this. We'll just put it right on top of where we've got that coming. And this has a distinctive look that we don't really want, because everyone will point at us and laugh. So we'll add a blur to it. We'll just blur out a lot of those artifacts that we don't necessarily want. Make sure you repeat the edge pixels. That's kind of adding a lot of atmosphere. As you can see, this is not really working for us here, so we're going to create an additional one without the blur. And this one's going to be, a good bit smaller. We'll kind of just put it on there. And we're going to mask this one, because we don't really want those clean rendered artifacts over there. So we're kind of just throw a mask up and give it a nice feather. So we've got artifacts there. It's adding a little bit, but it's nice and blurry. Doesn't have that look that everybody looks at to ridicule. I want to get a little bit more of a vertical flare here. So I'm going to duplicate this again. On this one, I'm going to crank it way up. Set it to like 250. And I'm going to alter my mask so that it's really wide and tall thing. And obviously this is pretty extreme, so I'm going to turn it down to almost nothing. But just to get a little bit of this atmosphere here. There's this bright light back there, and it's doing all kinds of stuff to our lens. I'm going to feather a little bit more than that. Okay, so we'll ram preview that, see how it looks. Okay, so that's our final shot for now. There's a lot of ways that we could tweak this. You can see we're actually getting kind of a nice effect here where the light's washing them out. This is a very, very big spotlight too. It looks like it's pointing directly at the lens and it's very focused. So you can kind of adjust the size of these things to taste. And yeah, like I said, the sky you might want less contrast in it or more contrast. There's a couple additional things that we could do to add more realism. If we're not happy with it, we could add a little expression to the to one of our lens flares. We can add a little wiggle expression, or use the wiggler to add some kind of random flicker to the light, so that it looks like it's busted or just flickering a little, like a real lamp might if it's a little aged. It's all about the narrative that you're going to tell. Or we could add some film grain to the whole image. If we were looking for a little bit more of a filmic, grainy look, you can just add some noise or grain using the basic tools. Or you could also pre-comp this entire thing and add a camera and just have it wiggle around a little bit. You want to make sure that if you're doing the virtual camera motion, that it's going to happen before these adjustment layers are put on. You're going to want that vignette on after any virtual camera moves. But I'm happy with the shot the way it is. I like the Rembrandt-esque, dark areas contrasted with the bright backgrounds with the gradients. It's kind of a nice, classy feel to it. But you should feel out your shots for what you like, and develop your own style. So this is Joe Locus for aetootsplus.com, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial.